Hey friends, I'm Christy Hughes and you're listening to Rock the Damn Boat. If you've ever bitten your tongue to keep the peace or said yes when every part of you wanted to say no, this one's for you. We're diving into the messy, real stuff that people pleasers like me have spent years avoiding. It's time to have the hard conversations, shake things up, and learn to stand tall even when it makes waves. And today is a very sensitive topic. So I am giving a trigger warning at the top of the show and also a resource. If you are unable to listen to an episode that talks about suicide, then I invite you to hit the pause button to skip this one for today. If you know of anyone or you yourself have had thoughts of harming yourself, there is a hotline 988 in the US. So just like 911, 988 is a suicide prevention hotline. You can call that number at any time. It is a free resource. And I encourage you to spread the word about this newer resource in the United States. We are talking about a very tough topic today for several reasons, and I'll get into all of that. But the most alarming to me is the fact that, according to the CDC, women aged 45 to 64 have a higher suicide rate per 100,000 people than any other age range in the US. 8.6 per 100,000. By comparison, 15 to 24, so teenagers at 5.5, women 65 to 74 at 6.2. So the highest age range is 45 to 64. The next highest is just before that, 25 to 44. It is worth pointing out also that I did, for comparison, look at men's suicide rates. So male suicide rates in the US per 100,000 almost quadruple. So at 45 to 64, they are the third highest at 29.2. The highest age range for male suicide is 75 plus at 40.7 per 100,000 population. So highest in late life. That's actually when my husband's grandfather took his own life, was later in life. He had lost his wife. When you think about elderly men facing age-related issues as well as possibly being alone for the first time in their lives, it makes a little bit more sense. With women, I am living firsthand through the complexity of mental health that is perimenopause and menopause. And I am now highly devoted to this topic. But I think it's important, even if you are younger, to understand what's coming in your late 40s and at 50, as I am when I am officially postmenopausal, and all of the changes that happen, all of the hormones that change in our body. And when we talk about those, we aren't just talking about sex hormones like estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone, although those are key elements of what happens in our body. But we're also talking about things like cortisol, the stress hormone. When I was younger, I took medication for a prolactin imbalance, which is a pregnancy hormone, and I wasn't even pregnant. I just had this hormone going haywire in my body. So after learning this statistic, after something that happened to me earlier this week, I wanted to not only shed light on this statistic, which most of my midlife friends were not aware of, but also to shed light on medication, hormone replacement therapy, different things that you might be doing or pursuing that can have a bigger impact on mental health than you might think. I am not a physician. I am not a therapist. I am speaking from my own personal experience and what happened to me, and just understanding that we need to take all of those side effects seriously, that we need to advocate to our doctors to be taken seriously. what might be typical for 90% of the population might not be true for you. So I have thrown a lot of stats at you kind of all over the place. So if I back up and start with what has unfolded over the past week and what is prompting this episode. Again, please, if you are sensitive to this topic or you feel in any way that this would be tough for you to listen to, then I invite you to hit the pause button or skip this episode because I don't want it to do more harm than good. But if you are interested in learning more about mental health and medication and different things that may be influencing you, then I invite you to listen and learn more from here. This is a Sunday Shortie, so I'm barely going to scratch the surface, but I will also give a couple of resources at the end so that you feel equipped to go out and learn more. I queued up the movie Heathers about a week ago. It is a cult classic. If you are like me and aged 50, then you probably watched it in your teenage years. My friends and I had that movie memorized, and I was shocked to realize as I started watching it that I could still recite all of the slams and jabs and all of the highly offensive language that I was learning at age 14. I believe it came out in March of '89, and I would have been almost 14. My friends and I were obsessed with this movie. Now, as a 50-year-old watching Heathers, I realized that they might have had a little bit of a flippant attitude about teenage suicide. And I have the stats in front of me. Ages 10 to 14 are 2.1 per 100,000 for females in the US. Ages 15 through 24 are 5.5 per 100,000 in the US. Now, it pains me to know that there's even 10 to 14 that has a stat. However, at that time in my life, I was starting to go through hormonal changes that came with puberty, and I was feeling this way in my own life. I was journaling very dark thoughts. And in watching Heathers and knowing how much I idolized Winona Ryder from her role in Beetlejuice and her journaling and how she was kind of the black sheep of the group, I identified with her. And I wonder how much of that movie and the content of that movie influenced how I felt about taking my own life. Did it seem like less of a big deal because in this movie, multiple teenagers were actually killed and faked as suicide, but they were treating it as if anyone would think that's normal, that they took their own lives. So it's just interesting the perspective that you gain at age 50 versus age 14. Now, did I still find the movie entertaining? Sure. Was it as entertaining as now as it was then? Absolutely not. I feel for the girls in that movie and how like what they were going through at that time with wanting to be popular and wanting to be pretty and wanting everyone to worship them. I certainly felt that way at age 14, 15 when I had that movie memorized. So that was kind of the start of it just being on my mind. With my menopausal journey, I have two things happening. I am exploring my mental health diagnoses, and of course, I was recently diagnosed with ADHD. I am treating my ADHD and anxiety diagnosis with an SSRI, and I'm on a newer medication than I was before. I'd been on Pristique for about 3 years. I discontinued its use, tried a couple of different medications, broke out in hives, started on a newer medication, was taking the low dose that I was given a sample of, felt fine. And in fact, I would say I started to feel a little more motivated and a little more focused than I had been prior to that. At the same time that I started the very low sample dose of this medication, I also switched HRT, hormone replacement therapy. I switched the dose of both things that I was taking. My GP recommended switching from an estradiol capsule to a patch. She said the transdermal patches work much better. And she also increased my progesterone dose. which is recommended to take alongside estrogen because it prevents uterine and ovarian cancer, I believe. So, over the course of the weekend, after I watched Heather's, I doubled my progesterone and doubled the dose of the new medication I was on. Monday, I woke up feeling fine. I got some things done. I was feeling a little bit encouraged about how the week was going to go. And by Monday night, I was like a sinking ship. My mood was dark. I was feeling like this intense level of shame. And there is a lot of financial fear that comes with leaving a steady paycheck and deciding to be self-employed. And especially with me taking February to write my novel and having my retreats planned further out in the year, so April and June, and not doing a lot of promotion right now, there's not any income coming in. And so I was feeling a lot of shame attached to that. I was telling myself that I was letting my husband down, and I was really letting those thoughts influence how I was feeling. And I remember going to my husband and sharing with him that I was feeling very discouraged, and not just discouraged, but very scared of my thoughts. And even though he was holding me and I was crying and I was talking to him about how I was feeling, I was still too scared to tell him how dark my thoughts were. But I remember leaving and going into the bathroom and staring in the mirror and just thinking to myself, I don't want to be here. And I went straight back out, went back to his arms and letting him hold me and telling him that I knew that there was something going on with the medication, and that between the two changes in my medication, that something was affecting how I was feeling mentally and the thoughts and whatever chemical reaction was going on in my brain that was making me think these thoughts, because they did not feel real. And I said, well, I'm going to contact my doctors, both of them, and tell them what's going on and that maybe, we need to adjust the doses. So, in reading about my SSRI, it absolutely can cause suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts, and you should contact your doctor immediately, which of course I did. Progesterone is a little more of a gray area. I could Google and I found Reddit threads where absolutely women were saying, I increased my progesterone. I wanted to hurt myself. And lots of women chimed in the comments to say, hey, that happened to me too. I contacted my doctor. Every patient is unique and different. I know they are all doing the best they can, but you get the response of, that's not typical. I would encourage you, any side effect that you're having that feels out of place or feels as big as this one did for me, that you absolutely talk to your doctor. It is not just in your head. So I started to feel better. And I knew that from taking the initial lower dose of progesterone that there was an adjustment period. When I first started taking it, I reached out to that doctor because several days in, I was feeling very irritable. And like, you think about the show Snapped, I was worried that I was going to snap. Like, I was feeling so irritable and cranky, and my temper was short. And again, he said, not typical. So I thought, well, if I stick out this dose, then maybe this will subside. Got the same information from my doctor about my SSRI. Maybe there will be an adjustment period and you will start to feel better. And certainly they would have taken me seriously if I had been concerned. And I, again, will throw in 988 as a suicide hotline and a resource in the US. I talked at length to my husband about how I had felt. I talked to friends about how I felt, of course, all of whom jumped in and said, you can call me anytime you are feeling this way. And it is hard. It is hard when you are in that moment and you don't want to bother anyone, which is how I'm sure so many women end up becoming one of those statistics. So, a couple of tips that I want to leave you with. One is, again, 988. 988 is a suicide prevention hotline available, as far as I know, just in the United States, but I'm sure whatever country you are in, that there is a similar resource available to you. Number two, I was reading about suicide statistics. There are studies done all over the globe on this age group. There were studies done on Korean women. There were studies done in the UK. So America is not the only culture that is dealing with this midlife mental health crisis. Learn more about menopause, perimenopause, what you can expect in terms of symptoms, because what you may think right now is just feeling crazy and out of control is a known symptom, and you'll feel less alone. So number two, educate yourself. And number three, this is very important to me because I am coming up on 8 years sober. Many of the studies that you'll read about, alcohol was involved with that decision to end someone's life. Take a hard look at how you are using substances to cope. And this may not be a challenge for you whatsoever. And if it's not, I applaud you for handling things in this crazy time of life. There is no shame if that is what is happening, because I have been there. I did not get sober until age 43. I encourage you to get help if substance use is exacerbating your symptoms. And I don't have one particular resource for that, but I do have a lot that I can talk to you about. If you need to reach out to me, my email is Christy@thrivewithchristy.com. You can also find me on Instagram as Rock the Damn Boat. I can point you in tons of directions. There are multiple paths to getting a clear head, which can help you navigate the craziness that is menopause and perimenopause. I'm honestly feeling so much better that I was a little nervous to share about my experience, but it is so important. I am rocking the damn boat. We are having the hard conversations because I want you to know that if you are struggling in this season of life, that you are not alone and that there is help waiting for you on the other side. I'm excited to bring these conversations to the table in April, and I hope that you'll follow and subscribe so that you can stay in touch on all of these things. There are multiple resources out there. Well Fed Women is one of my favorite podcasts right now for this topic. So there are other women out there talking about that who specialize in these matters. I'm just sharing what happened to me. Thank you so much for listening to the show today. You've been listening to Rock the Damn Boat, a podcast produced and recorded by Christy Hughes. You can follow, subscribe on both Apple and Spotify, and your 5-star review goes a long way. Thank you so much for your support of the show.